I don't think I ever really believed everything.
And I realized that quite a few of the things didn't hold water.
The actual religions were man-made from wherever.
God? Who's God? What's God?
I think skepticism really is the first step.
Scientific zest and zeal for the real world.
That was it. I was an atheist from then on.
That seems to me to be the essence of religion. It is a made-up story to satisfy.
Hi, my name is Rad.
Hi, I'm Susan, and this is our friend Ed, here to tell us about his road to atheism. Welcome.
Welcome to the road to atheism.
So, in the beginning, you were born into a
very religious Catholic family. I went to Catholic grade schools, graduated from a Jesuit high school and a Jesuit college. Mm-hmm. But it was just a question of doubts being piled on top of doubts, or beliefs being piled on beliefs.
Do you remember when it started?
I think I started in the first grade.
Oh, you beat me.
Well, tell us about your family. What's your background of your father and your mother as far as religion is concerned?
My father had a master's in chemistry, and my mother was a school teacher.
Mm-hmm. And where were you brought up?
Background?
Beg pardon?
Catholic.
Religious background?
Yeah, very.
They were both
yes.
Catholic?
Yeah, both.
Roman Catholic?
Yes, yes, indeed.
Mm-hmm. And you were raised where?
In Cincinnati, Ohio.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Your neighborhood consists of demographically as far as?
Let's put it this way. A mixed marriage in my neighborhood was somebody who married a girl from another parish.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
So,
gotcha. That's very good. Well put. Your schooling and education when you started to...
What did bring that first doubt when you were very young?
The first doubt was the story of original sin. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was incredibly, as a child of 6, I thought it was incredibly unfair.
Yeah.
That I should be made to feel guilty for something that I had absolutely no part in. Mm-hmm. But it went on and on. It was always a series of these things of being invited to understand a mystery by making an act of faith.
St. Thomas.
Yes, and I think I was carried all the way to college in St. Thomas when I found that all they were trying to do was justify the sacrament of the Eucharist as transubstantiation by saying that the divine was present under the appearances of bread and wine. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, wait a minute. How can we detect anything but the appearances? Mm-hmm. And of course, the wags always say, well, you see that pear? That's Westminster Cathedral under the appearances of a pear. So at that point, this whole tower of beliefs and just literally toppled over and fell down. Mm-hmm.
Did you come out to your parents or?
Well, in a way, they just knew. They knew, and I think certainly my brother was 2 years younger than I am. Was going that way too, and we just had no more use for it.
Just your 2 boys, or?
No, there 3 boys and 1 girl.
And the other 2 are still believers, or?
My one brother passed away in 1999, but he was indeed still a believer. But I would think that both he and my sister are probably what I would call cafeteria Catholics. In other words, they have
holidays only, and they'll go to the church.
Well, I think they pick the dogmas that they would like to believe, that they feel comfortable with.
What kind of grip would you say the Pentateuch, the Torah, and the other different beliefs out there have on people? How much of a grip do they have?
I think that's what makes it so difficult to become an atheist. Mm-hmm. We almost live in this totalitarian state where the first 5 books of the Bible are just imposed upon you in one way or another. Even if it's not in a stained glass window or a statue, it just goes on and on. And it's such a grip that we always cede them the first move and then say, well, we have to really go out of our way to say, you've made an assertion. Help me out.
Right.
Show me the evidence. I mean, really show me, because they can't. The entire thing is just this leap of faith. And probably the most scholarly thing that I ever came across with discussions in college about,
As a Jesuit.
as in the Jesuit college,
Yes.
is Soren Kierkegaard,
Yeah.
and talking about the sacrifice of Abraham. All these religions, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, all hovering around that one myth of the sacrifice of Abraham.
Yes.
And the question was, well, how do you understand that? Well, Kierkegaard, as I interpreted it, said, you simply have to make a blind leap of faith. Well, at that point in my life, I couldn't make those blind leaps of faith anymore.
But when they say, you know, how can you be moral without God? Here's a God who orders someone to murder their child, and the guy's perfectly going along with it until somebody else stops him. And I'm going, this is supposed to be moral?
This is a brutal myth. This is
Yeah.
That's right.
This is like the people that call that the wonderful good God is practically like ISIS, except he stops one
he-
knife stroke short of plunging a knife into his
He
son.
chastises the bearded ones with taking cow dung, and throwing it in their face.
Right? But you see,
Okay, I've forgotten that part.
That is in the Bible.
Oh, I'm sure, because you have
That's
more
right.
knowledge of it. I
That's
haven't
right.
read it since I was a teenager.
Isn't there something? And what this really does is tell you that it's really man-made. What kind of a God would do something like this to want to throw cow dung into somebody's face? Or if somebody yells that you're a bald person and be able to get 3 bears to want to go and chew and dismember the person's body.
Yeah.
What kind of a God would that be? It's basically what I would call the 3 Bs, okay? And that's what's called it's an old term, but I won't get into it right now, but I'll
Okay.
let you think about that and I'll get back.
So you graduated from college. You're basically an atheist.
yeah, and have been since
Yeah.
roughly 1959, 1960, but just quietly. And I think that I have certainly, in marrying my wife, who is also an atheist, our children are atheists, our grandchildren, for the most part, are atheists, and some have deviated into becoming Wiccans.
Okay.
And the ex-Wiccan is now studying Hebrew. So,
Okay.
Department
Oh,
of go figure. So,
Did any of the did you let the children discover the reasons why atheism exists, why they came to that belief, or up to that conclusion, or did you teach them that before? Or did you give them an opportunity to let them use their gray matter?
very, very informal chats, but I think that they're basically very, very intelligent people and came to that conclusion on their own. And I mean, it was not something
Which
that
is a good way to do it.
Yeah, we
Gives them
didn't.
a chance to
It's
use
not
their
something
brains.
we really rammed down their throats. And as far as proselytizing, I haven't done that very aggressively. I admire people who go out and do the tabling with the group on Saturdays.
You should try it. It's very informal. You just sit around and chat, and then every once in a while someone comes by and asks a question or two.
That's
and
right.
it's
By the way, with those 3 Bs, biblical Bedouin BS.
Well, no, but I think
You got that? That's where the 3 Bs come in.
the
This is going back to the Neolithic Age, the Bronze Age, where they thought that the stars were embers of coal in the sky, and that the sun traveled around the earth, and that the earth was flat.
well, that's
And there was a campfire things passed on through hearsay, and hearsay gets a chance to be embellished, and this is what's in the Bible, embellished, and a lot of stuff that's left out. But please,
And-
BBBs.
And yet, this gives evidence to my point that this thing has such a grip on our minds, but at the same time, we're both saying this is malarkey. They're folk tales
That's right,
that
exactly.
whether it's
Fairy tales.
Greek or Latin epic poetry, that's almost as believable as this. At least there is a Mount Olympus anyway. But
True.
the shabbiness of this of this charade and the fact that it is a whole man-made product. And as I'm sure you may have had this experience, but I had it recently with my one grandson. If you ask somebody something, they will do their best to give you an answer. Now, if you're a kind of a power figure in your tribe, a la a shaman, and somebody says, where do we go after we die? And the shaman says, well, let me tell you, and spins a yarn, and it becomes believable in that tribe's context. And that seems to me to be the essence of religion. It is a made-up story to satisfy people's quest for information against the face of all these uncertainties.
The explanatory drive. We have within us an explanatory drive.
Yes.
We need explanations. Why is the sky blue? Why does it rain?
Yes.
We lack science, but we had storytellers.
We are inquisitive. We ask
Yes.
questions, and which is always good to ask questions.
Yes.
It's that at that time they didn't have the appropriate answers because they didn't have that.
They didn't have science.
Science or means in which to do that, so they made it up.
Indeed.
And to satisfy, to satiate the brethren. And unfortunately, that has carried all the way through up until and including today.
And we're in the space age,
It's
50
21st
years into,
century.
yes,
And here we are still
believing
telling
Bronze
that
Age
type.
nonsense.
Isn't that something?
Well, because I grew up in Cincinnati, I am going to make it a point when we go back there this summer just to enter the Temple of Malarkey, which is the Museum of Creationism, which is only about 25 miles downriver, where apparently I can see a man's footprints in stone right next to a dinosaur's footprints, proving, therefore,
That
That
the
is
Flintstones
the Earth began, I think, back on October the
6,000
23rd
and the
in
Flintstones
1944.
was a documentary.
Right.
Indeed, they were.
Yes.
It's truly amazing.
It would be neat if he could build an ark the way the Bible describes Noah building the ark. You know, this primitive man building this ark does it in, how long did it take him back then to build the ark? Do you remember? I mean, it didn't take him very long.
I don't remember the time,
And,
how long it took,
and
but
yet
not
this
long.
guy's, with all the money and all these modern resources, has been taking years and years to build the ark. Which,
But all that came from the Epic of Gilgamesh.
yes.
Which
yes.
was written about 600 to 1,000 years
Yeah.
before.
And
the
Noah's
so-called flood.
Utnapishtim or Ziusudra and, you know, the whole thing.
The whole thing on Noah's Ark, here you have something like that, according to the Bible, if you who beget whom in
Yeah.
reverse, you go back to the year 2348 BCE before.
Well, that's what the Bishop of Usher did. You know,
Yes.
he's the one who.
Exactly. And at that time, what did you? Well, he went all the way back to Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
Okay. But if you go back to the year 2348 BCE, what did you have? You had the Aegean Greek civilization to the north. You had the Nile Valley Egyptian civilization to the southwest. You had the Mesopotamia to the east, Indus Valley further to the east. And around the globe, which I didn't know about, you had the Chinese Yao dynasty. All of these
And India.
civilizations.
Don't forget India.
I said
Oh,
Indus Valley.
okay.
All of these civilizations had written history before, during, and after the so-called flood and don't remember their demise.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
And since the only people to survive the flood was Noah and his family, that means that the Chinese, the Indians, the Native Americans, and the Aborigines, they're all Jewish. If you believe that.
Yeah, these are the interesting times that we sit back and for those who are willing to take the time and look at those things and see the absurdity and you, of course, see that.
You
Well,
saw
I-
it since you were 5.
Well, yeah, that's probably giving me a little bit too much credit because those things were submerged under an acceptance. And,
What's your background? What is your educational background? And where'd you work?
I worked as an
Generally.
advertising copywriter and then just worked my way up to the ranks. And when I left that business, I was a part owner in a small agency in Richmond, Virginia.
Right.
And I
Did you-
sold that share to my partner and came up here.
Oh, very good. Success. Did you, at the time that you did work for another organization, did you have any problems? Or did you mention anything as far as your beliefs as far as...
I mean, Virginia's in the South, so was it hard to be an atheist down there?
it's
or-
not that much of a South compared to South Carolina and Georgia and those areas. This is a little close to Washington.
Being a New Yorker,
you know.
they're all sort of lumped together, so I was curious.
But, yeah.
I would say
That's a good
that
point.
when we were all young and everybody disavowed religion, just said, there is no God, and by George, I'm just certain of that. Well, as people got to be move on in years and either fear of death or the desire for greater social acceptance, they became pillars of the church. And I know people who admit to me that the only reason they go to that church is that they can show off their wife's mink. So, but that is pushing a little bit far. But it was not hard. I did have one fellow who was just wanted to convert me in the worst way, and finally I had to take him out at lunch and say, look, probably nothing I say is going to change your mind, since you're so committed to this literal interpretation of the Bible, and nothing I say is going to change your mind. So let's just drop the subject, because in a way he was my, not exactly a subordinate, but he was just a little bit lower in rank than I was.
He wasn't trying to get you back to Catholicism. He was trying to get you to...
just back to more of an evangelical.
Oh, evangelical.
So even if you'd been Catholic, he might have tried to convert you.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that he worked on a lot of people, and there was one other at that time. I think there was one other fundamentalist fellow in the office back in the art department. Mm-hmm. But I think my road to atheism, though, I must say that in comparison to a lot of folks, I've made a lot of compromises. Now, I'm going to give you an example of a compromise. Okay. One of my best friends, possibly my best friend and drinking buddy, on his front door, he has a picture of Menachem Schneerson.
Oh,
and so I suspect that
Lubavitch. Lubavitch leader who died.
But that he really expects this guy to be the Messiah, or thinks that he is. Now, he knows where I stand, and so without him saying anything, I know where he stands. So. Why mess up a very pleasant friendship?
Of course, and just swallow hard,
right?
Without having to say.
Yeah, just soldier on, or my, members of my family who are still believers. Let them go.
Well, that's you brought up a good point. How old is he, by the way?
My pal.
Your pal.
About 65, 66.
65, 66. Do you know that? With Menachem Schneerson, that's he was the head of Lubavitch,
right,
which is located in Brooklyn,
right.
And however, they were able to reach through radio all over the world. They had connections all over the world, very strong. When he died, which was considered that it wouldn't happen, he was supposed to be beyond that. They had the teenagers. All the way up to ages 18, 19, 20, and 21 cried in disbelief that would happen. What that showed you was, and what they did was, they had people of that particular, and I want to say tribe, but that group and belief, were told not to watch TV, not to see television, not to read any books or listen to the radio, but just follow through what was written down there. And therefore, they had no knowledge of what real world was like.
Right.
And so when that happened, they were just shook up. And this tells you a lot about the ages back in the Neolithic age. And during that time, you had followers of any particular group, and you had many different sects, many different groups that their leaders, their Grand Rebbe, would tell them certain things, and they had to follow through and do that. To the benefit of that group, they were able to politically be very effective because they voted as a bloc.
And they still do.
And they still do,
well,
exactly.
In Muncie and Airmont over in
and up
County.
New York State in Ramapo, I believe it is, Ken?
Yeah,
you still have a blocking group up there. And that happened one time in Williamsburg, and with the Lubavitch. The way they had to settle a lot of things was the son of one and the daughter of the other, they got together and married, and that settled a lot of problems. I know you were thinking about, what is your feeling about astronomy with the large numbers that existed out in the universe? Here we have a galaxy that is between 200 and 400 billion stars, and we have between 150 to 200 billion galaxies in the known universe,
or more, possibly.
And we may very have a multiverse as far as that goes. We have found to date something like 3,500 exoplanets in a small area called Lyra of the
in
star
just
system.
20 years.
Okay. Yeah, and we have extrapolated that to be about 1.6 planets per star. So that puts in the multi-billions. Right. Hundreds of billions, okay? So what are your feelings about that when you hear that? And here's in the Bible, it says that it took on day 4, it took just one day to create the universe, and yet it took 5 days to create little old Earth.
Well, it's sad that this kind of knowledge is available, particularly now through the internet. All these things are just so accessible, and whether it's the age of the universe at 13.7 billion years, or
That's right.
the astronomical distances. But if you just literally sit down with a calculator and model some of these things, and you don't even have to model it yourself. You can go to the web and say model of the solar system, and you can plug in a figure for, let's say, the diameter of the sun, and based on that one insertion, it'll tell you exactly how far. If the sun is a foot, then how far the Earth is going to be, and how far the nearest star is going to be. And of course, these are distances that are almost incomprehensible.
That's right.
Just here on Earth.
Our sun, to give you an example of the diameter of our sun, the Earth is 8,000 miles in diameter. It would take 108 Earths side by side, okay, just to cover the diameter of the sun. 108
Yes.
Earths, right? And yet our sun, which is a star, is a relatively medium to a little small-sized star compared to giants out there. It would look like our Earth looks to
Betelgeuse.
our star. Betelgeuse is one of them. Sirius is another, and you can go on to huge sizes out there. The universe is not only vast, it's large, and it's incomprehensible as far as what exists. All
size.
this is to think that one person or one God made this and is so concerned that he gave his only begotten Son to take care of little Earth's problems.
Right.
Isn't that
And yet
something?
with all the, and with they
Amazing.
can't find heaven, and you can't
Yeah.
dodge around the state of mind. And yet there are people believing out there. I went to a funeral, and the fellow who was presiding at this funeral tried to console the person who had just lost their mother and saying, well, she's up in heaven right now, looking down on us, and she's got that brand new body. Now, that came from left field on me. I had no
A
idea.
new body?
The people who never think of a grander scale of things. For example, a wife could say, I'm going to pray that my husband gets a raise. And lo and behold, guess what? Maybe 2 weeks or so, or a month later, or whatever.
7 years later, he gets a raise.
He gets a raise. He gets a raise. And she says, well, that's because God is a kind God. And oh, really? Well, what about the children of Darfur and the starving children elsewhere and the tsunamis that are wiping out 240,000 people?
Or that God cares about who wins a football game.
Right. And what about those? You mean to tell me your husband getting a raise is more important?
Yeah.
I think children start to realize when they get older that all of a sudden, and they start thinking, if they don't hear it from other kids saying, guess what, it's no real Santa Claus, but they say, reindeer don't really fly, according to the Encyclopedia and Britannica or whatnot.
Or it's a big world, how does he stop at every one of them?
But exactly. If reindeer don't fly, there goes that theory right out the window.
Well, no, but it's magic reindeer, It's,
Magic, yes. Everything is magic, and God works in mysterious ways.
Yeah.
And we hope you folks out there realize that this is the reason why you came to your conclusion, and there are other conclusions that you probably have come to. We'd like to know about that. Ken, do you have any questions that you want to
I'd like to
bring
know
up?
a statement that I'd like. You've heard that magical magician team of Penn and Teller.
Yes.
And Penn makes the statement, if God told you to kill your son and you don't do it, you're an atheist. and they're
Fearful. They're also fearful to investigate.
It's easier the status quo is easier than change.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some...
Well, especially in certain communities where you don't really dare come out because you'll be fired or your businesses will be,
Right.
So you'll sit there in church and going,
But I think now the younger people are questioning that.
Mm-hmm.
And especially with the nuclear family where you didn't have that, you lived with your parents and grandparents for years and years, and now you
Dispersed.
Well, also they have the internet. They're
Dispersed.
able to
Even
Google.
so, by not physically living in close proximity,
You're not constrained in your thinking.
That opens up.
That's true.
And you have more options. I mean, you can move to a new town, and who knows? Facebook may be the new God. That's what people are complaining. They don't have to go to church.
People are getting a diverse of opinion when they move to a new town and listen
Yeah.
to other things rather than just that one thought of by parents and grandparents if they've grown up, as you mentioned, in Catholic or whatever it may be. If there are people out there who are not quite sure as to what they want to do and think as to which ways to go, would you have some advice that you might like to leave with them? Thought with them?
I'll try to sum it up in one sentence, and that is to doubt your beliefs, but believe your doubts even more firmly, and your doubts will lead you. And I believe there are many people out there with many, many doubts, and I believe that they could join us. And we have to reach out to these folks and find out what they really believe, where we can find allies, and kind of bring them over to our side, I think to a worldview that is based on science. My grandson is studying marine biology, and his minor will be in sustainability. So this is his world. I mean,
Yes.
I'm kind of a back number here.
Yeah.
I'm 77 years old, so I can contribute very little to the course of this earth. But young people can, and I think we need them to
Save the earth.
and essentially to save it not just for themselves, but also for the coming generations. We really need atheists. We need them. But we may even need a different name for atheists. But that's something else.
Well, in an ideal
It's called
world,
critical thinking and deductive reasoning. And I think when they do critical thinking on that, they're going to start to say, I'm going to stretch that. What happens? I'm not going to be so fearful of worrying about whether I go up there or go down there. I question things. In fact, that's one of the science programs on TV Discovery mentions, question everything.
well,
Don't
in
be
an
afraid to do
ideal
that.
world, we're born atheists, and
Yes, until
unfortunately, a
parents.
lot of families brainwash their children into these mythologies. Whereas in an ideal world, we'd let the kids grow up and let them ask questions. And I mean, maybe they would become believers, but maybe they'd stay non-believers. But
Children
let them choose.
Humans are inquisitive.
Yes.
And they'll ask questions. Why is the sky blue? Why is this here? What is this for? How did the universe start?
God.
Was there anything before the universe besides the so-called first cause? Couldn't be. There had to be something in order to have that. And they'll start questioning many things. Maybe there is a multiverse.
Yeah.
Who knows? But the question everything is one of the key, the cornerstones of humanity. And we have to do that.
Always ask the next question.
That's right. I want to thank you very much.
No, thank you very much, man. Thank you, Gene.
Thank you.
Pleasure.